Hi everyone, I'm Cassandra from the Oxford Weaving Studio. Thank you so much for joining me for this introduction to papercraft weaving tutorial. Now in this tutorial, we're going to be showing you how to create a woven project such as this using paper. In this tutorial, we'll talk about the merits of weaving with paper. We'll show you the different materials you need and the different steps you'll need to prepare those materials. We'll discuss and show you ways of weaving with pattern and color and a nice way of finishing your project. This project is fantastic both for adults and children and uses materials that you'll easily find in your home. So we hope you enjoy it, and if you really enjoy it, please share photos with us either via Instagram or Facebook, and you can find us at the Oxford Weaving Studio. Now, I hope you enjoy this tutorial and look forward to others in the future. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Hi everyone, I'm Cassandra from the Oxford Weaving Studio. Thank you so much for joining us for this introduction to papercraft weaving tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to weave this simple papercraft mat using just paper. Now for this project, you're going to need only 5 materials. You're going to need paper. I've chosen both a solid color and a pattern paper. You're going to need scissors, a pencil, some glue, and a ruler. We're going to be essentially cutting up the solid paper, creating our warp. We're going to be cutting up strips of paper, which we'll be showing you is the weft, and we're going to be weaving them in and introducing them into the paper. At the end, we're going to create a little papercraft frame for you to glue your project down and to keep it all together. So please follow along and hopefully you'll enjoy the project. So we're going to measure and set our project out here in portrait. You could actually start with your project as landscape, but I'm going to continue weaving as a portrait. Now you're going to simply mark off the space of each one. Now can you see mine is only 19.3 centimeters. It's a little off, so I'm not going to be too precious. I'm going to center it somewhat like this along the 19 centimeters, and I'm simply going to mark off let's say 2 centimeter widths. 1, 2, 3, all the way along. Now I'm left-handed, so apologies if I'm blocking what I see. But as you can see here, I've marked off 2 centimeter strips, and can you see that there's 1 centimeter roughly at the end over here? Now we can cut this off later. We're going to do the same. We're going to turn our paper around. And now, bearing in mind that we've measured off 1 centimeter at the start, and I'm getting that roughly back where the 19 centimeters is. My paper is a little bit off, but again, not worrying too much about that at this stage. So I'm going to mark off the 1st centimeter, then working every 2 all the way along. Now, when we're trying to create the warp, we have to bear in mind that we don't want to cut strips right from bottom to top. I'm going to show you what that means for one that I've already prepared. So if you can see here, we're going to create this warp where one end, all of the stripes or the slits are still attached, and they're going to be cut at one end. So again, cut at one end and solid at the other. And that's because it's going to make it much easier for everyone to work if one side is already, still remains attached. So you're going to measure out your strips. And again, apologies, I'm left-handed. Now I haven't done this too prescriptively. If you are working very accurately, then please do feel free. Now I'm going to cut all the way down to one end, and since I seem to have been a bit more generous on this end, I've started at the top here, and I'm just following along and marking out. And again, starting at the top, working all the way down, and preparing each of these. Now you get the idea. So next up, what you're going to do, once you've marked each and every stripe, you're going to, first of all, we're going to cut off that first one. Now we're going to use scissors. Now if you have an X-Acto knife, this will work a little bit quicker for you. But if you're working with scissors, you can help your children or you can let them get busy themselves. But I like a little bit of symmetry when I'm working. So I'm going to cut off this slightly odd 1 centimeter strip. Now And I'm going to set that aside. I'm not going to need that. Now I'm going to cut each of these strips to create that fan-like structure I made earlier. But I'm going to stop, and just remember, bear in mind, you're going to stop at the top. Now, you want to leave probably anywhere from minimum 1 centimeter up to 2 centimeters at the top. Now, I've done this before, so I'm a little bit more sure that I'm not going to get it wrong. But if you're not sure, try and leave 2 centimeters at one end. Okay, I think you get the idea. You're going to cut all the lines you've drawn all the way across, and you're going to create your warp. So here I have mine that's been pre-prepared. I've got my warp. Now, something to also bear in mind is that when you're weaving, you always start to weave from bottom to top. So you're going to build up each of your rows. So again, this is the warp, and we're going to be introducing paper in the weft. In order to do that, make sure that you have the solid side, the connected side, closest to you here. So I'm going to keep it down like that. Now, you may or may not want to weave with interchanging color and patterns. I'm going to show you just a few different ways. So I'll just put this aside for the moment. I'm going to show you, if you can see here, here's a version of color where you've got yellow, green, blue, purple, blue, green, and yellow. That's just plain weave, and I'll discuss that and show you what that means in a moment. But I've tried to change colors. It adds a bit of variety. And if you look here from the back, you can see that because I had one side white and one patterned, you can really see what that looks like if you were to use 2 solid colors. Now this next model, again showing you the colored side first, is using all the same color weft. So although the pattern paper does have different colors in it, it is the same color. And again, using the background, which is a solid pink. But from the reverse, I've created a twill pattern. And again, you can see that most clearly with it white and pink. And here's one final one, again, getting a little bit more complex as we go. And this one here is all again the same color, but it combines 2 different patterns, if you can pick that out. So we've got one pattern on this side and this side, which is the same. And then we have this nice reverse twill in the middle. Now, a little bit harder to see with a pattern, but perhaps now, if I show it to you this way, it's a lot clearer. Here you can see both the plain weave pattern on this side and on this side, and you've got your twill that's going here in the middle. So just to give you some ideas of how you can use both color or pattern to create your project. And we're going to, if we're doing plain weave essentially means to pick up the first, leave down the second, pick up the third, leave down the fourth, pick up the fifth, leave down the sixth, and so on. Now, everyone learns differently. Some people are visual, and for them, seeing that you pick up every other paper is quite straightforward. That makes sense to them. But some people need to have numbers. They're more numerical. So if you don't know what the best way to weave, you might find it interesting to write 1, 2, 1, 2 along on your papers at the top of your paper. This means that either numerically or visually, you can see which is the one you need to be picking up first in order to create plain weave. Now that we've got our warp, we're once again going to set that aside. Now we're going to also cut strips of paper. Now I think this is, again, quite self-explanatory. I'm going to take my paper, and if I've cut 2 centimeter, if we see here, if we've cut 2 centimeter strips for our weaving, you can cut any thickness you want. You can even cut different thicknesses. But again, that gets things a little bit more complicated, so we won't jump ahead too far. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to cut 2 centimeter width warp papers to match exactly what we have here in the warp. So again, taking your ruler and measuring out from one end to the next, you're going to measure 2 centimeters all the way along, marking out as you go. Now again, with an X-Acto knife, that would be much quicker. And then from the bottom, starting from 0, marking out what 2 centimeters is, all the way along. and simply drawing those off as you go along. And so on. Now cutting again, similar to creating your warp. There we go. You're wanting to cut as best you can, straight all the way along. Great practice for children if the children are trying to create these little strips of paper. There we go. So I think you understand what we're doing here. We're trying to create all these little weft papers, which we're going to weave across in this fashion, like that. So I'm going to take these papers here, and I'm just going to use this color, and if you can see here, I'm going to use this darker purple. And again, these are either colored on one side and white on the other, so they're good for illustration purposes to show you both front and back and how you can create nice patterns with that. Now, with weaving, now that you've got your warp and you've got your weft papers, it's simply a question of weaving them in. Now, again, I've marked mine off so that you have the 1, 2, 1, 2, but also I'm a visual person, so I often can judge what I see quite quickly. Now, the easiest way to weave with paper is to gently lift up, holding one end, just with one finger, lifting up the first piece. So I'm going to start with this patterned one here in the pink, and I'm going to take the end, I'm going to slip it under. I'm going to go over number 2, the second one, and I'm going to, again, lift up this next one. Then I'm going to go to 1 again and lift up that paper all the way along. Again, lifting up the paper, sliding it through, and lifting up the paper. Now, at this point, you're wanting to bring your paper down, and there's 2 things that you're going to note. One, because you've kept the bottom connected, it's going to stop here, which is far easier than had you cut individual strips trying to keep it all straight. So that's one thing to note. The second is, can you see that these papers are actually longer? Now, if you had paper that was the exact width of your woven piece, then that's fantastic. You can leave it like that. However, I find the younger children tend to be much more secure in their weaving if their paper weft, this one here, is longer, and it'll become more apparent afterwards. But essentially, it won't fall out of the work and go on a diagonal and slip around as much. It's much easier for you to have wider edges. But if you're an adult, of course, you can adjust accordingly. So that's the first row of plain weave. The second row is, of course, picking up number 2. So weaving again, and can you notice I'm also weaving at the top of the picture, and I'm sliding my paper down. Now, this is the same way that you weave actually with a loom, because the space that you're creating is a little bit easier when it's further up. And then you slowly bring it down with your fingers. That's it. Slide it down into position. Now you're going to connect it as close as you can. But in fairness, you don't want to get it too close. If you try to push down your paper so that it touches each of your rows before, you're going to find that you're going to struggle to do that. And what it might do is actually spread your paper out like this, so that you're distorting the shape. Now, this is actually something that's quite fundamental in weaving with yarns and materials, because weaving is essentially the relationship between weaving your warp and your weft and the materials that you use. So if you try and squeeze something, two types of materials that are super chunky, if you're going to weave plain weave, which is over and under each one, that's the most secure and most stable fabric you can create. If you're using really too chunky ones and your space is too tightly packed, you're not going to be able to weave properly. It's going to get stuck. So that's what you're trying to achieve here. You're leaving just a little bit of space so that you don't crowd it. Now, I'm wanting to do a pattern where I'm doing 2 different colors. Now, you can do any kind of combination you want, and actually children are great with this because they just play and they create. They don't think too much about it. Adults might want to plan this out in advance. So again, we're taking our paper, and you can weave different ways, whichever way that is. You're going to weave your pattern, and then you're going to be all sorted like that. bringing your paper down and weaving along. I'll weave one more and I'm going to show you. We're going to skip ahead and show you another project that I've completed in advance. So this is it. So this is the simple way of weaving. Lifting up in order your paper warp and then introducing, sliding across your paper weft. This is one I finished and completed earlier. Now again, just to note that this one here, the spacing is narrower. It's 1.5 centimeters. Or is it? Or it is, no, 1 centimeter, excuse me, it's 1 centimeter. So I've chosen for it to be 1 centimeter and my weft is 1 centimeter. Can you spot here very quickly that it's plain weave? So it's exactly the same pattern we were using, except that I've chosen to have sort of this greeny yellow at the beginning, alternate a little bit with the blue, and then continue on with the blue. Now the other thing we haven't done is we need to prepare what we call a frame. Now in order to get around the edges and to have them all stuck down, I've created a little paper mat that you can put on top. Now you can choose any color you want, it really is up to you. And exactly how wide the frame you make is, again, it's a personal choice. As you can see here, I've chosen a 1 centimeter, which matches almost perfectly around the edges. And simply, again, taking a piece of paper, you are going to measure with your ruler, depending on the thickness. Earlier we were using a 2 centimeter frame, so you're going to measure in where 2 centimeters is roughly, and this I kind of use by eye. I tend to be a person who does this a lot by eye, measuring your 2 centimeters from the edge, roughly 2 centimeters down. You can double check that as you go along, so if you've not quite got it right, I was a little bit off, I was a millimeter off, so that's where I should be cutting to. Same again, and this one I was 2 off, so I'm going to put it there. And again, finding what 2 centimeters is from this edge, 2 centimeters from this edge, checking again to make sure I've got 2 centimeters, a little bit off, 1 centimeter off, that's probably 2 centimeters off. Great. So there we have it. Next we're going to do our lines to create our frame. All the way along. And then you're going to cut this out. So I think you can imagine how we do that. So here we have paper, and we're simply going to cut around the edges to create our frame. And as you can see here, there we go, cutting up to that corner and creating a nice frame. And again, this is the frame that I have cut earlier. So if you can see here, we now have our finished project and we have our frame. So what you next need to do is you need to grab your Pritt stick or your glue, whichever way you work. You're going to glue the surround of your frame. There we go. My glue's a little bit sticky, a little bit melty, but it should do the trick. Working around the outside, particularly the corners, as in any project. And you're going to keep weaving all the way around. Might have to, get a bit more glue. Here we are. Trying not to glue my fingers or the table. There we are, nice. Closing my stick. And here we are, simply just gluing it down. So trying to align it as best you can. So once it's stuck down, you can flip your work over. You can have a look and see, like this one, any of them are sticking up, any are disobeying, not doing what you want. I just want to go and stick these back down, push them there. Wouldn't worry too much about the sides. If you want though, I think probably that might be not a bad way of keeping the sides down, but again, sticking each of the sides down as you go. I'm going to leave that for now. but I will show you next what we have here. Okay, so next we're simply, and I'm actually going to cut from this side because it might be easier to see where we are, but we're going to just trim off all of those ends. Just work your way along on both sides. Same again on the other side. There we go. Here we are, almost finished. And then clipping just the last few. Okay, so now remove all those aside. This is what it looks like at the top. This one here is still not cooperating. So now it's intact, it's not going to go anywhere. You've chosen a pattern that's quite straightforward, and there's your finished product. Can you see here that we've got our plain weave, we're interchanging colors, and there you have it, your finished product. I'm showing you just once again, last few samples, and again, a twill pattern, which you can experiment with, lifting up different sequences, and your fine finished piece. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this and found it's pretty straightforward. If you do have any questions or you do want to get in touch, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook and send me a message. You can find us at the Oxford Weaving Studio, and get in touch and show us some images of your finished projects. Thank you so much, and speak to you soon. Bye.